All right, guys, welcome back to the Sex and Bacon podcast. On today's episode, I have a lovely guest with me, Jill McLennen. And today we are going to dive into a little bit of Jill's background, and then we're going to talk about a couple different topics polyamory, BDSM, which I'm excited to talk about. I haven't had that conversation yet. And then we'll probably dive into a little bit of healing sexual trauma. I know I've talked about it a little bit before in a different episode, but it's always nice to have a different person's perspective, their experience, and what worked for them, and hopefully help, other people as well. So, Jill, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. I've been excited since we booked it to have this conversation.
Yeah, same. When I saw I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to dive straight into the BDSM conversation just because
Sure.
it's a great topic, and yeah, I haven't had that conversation with anybody yet. So, is that something specifically that you or so? I guess maybe I'll start off. So, are you married?
Yes, so I am married. I've been married now for about 17 years,
Okay.
very long time. And that's why, like, yeah, I think, the conversation about the BDSM and the polyamory really go together because being polyamorous is what allowed me to explore my interest in BDSM, where it's not something that my husband and I ever explored together. It's just not the dynamic in our relationship.
Okay.
And so I would have never been able to really explore that part of myself if I didn't have a polyamorous relationship that allowed us to really go out and discover a lot more about ourselves, and not just sexually. I think a lot of people think, oh, polyamory is just about sex. Like, it's really not. Just same thing with BDSM. It's not just about the sex. For me, the BDSM really went hand in hand with my healing of my sexual traumas because it was something that allowed me to give control to somebody very consciously, understanding that I can trust them, that if I needed to stop, we would be able to stop. And for me, I mean, I guess, like, slight trigger warning around, what we're going to talk about. But I'm sure your guests probably already kind of have some expectations of things that you talk about. Um, for me, I had a boss when I was in college. He drugged me and he raped me. And so I was never able to have any feelings that, like, I could have fought back even if I had the opportunity, because I couldn't. I mean, I think that's why he drugged me, because I think he knew there was no other way to do it. And so there was always part of me that, like, wanted to fight it, wanted to also be able to be like in a place where, the times when I've really gone into a scene with a partner, and I have a very high pain tolerance, which is partially why now I've backed away from it a little bit, because my husband, God love him, was like, maybe you should rethink some of this. Like, he was afraid that I was actually going to get hurt because I never asked anybody to stop. And that was what I needed as part of my healing. I needed to be in a place where I was completely in control, but I never asked somebody to stop. I didn't beg, I didn't cry. I had complete control and complete power in the situation. And it really gave me back a part of me that I think I lost when I was in college. This part of me that felt like I had any control over what happened to my body. Because from that moment on, when that person did that to me, I wasn't afraid afterwards, but I just felt broken. And I felt like I had something taken from me, which was my power. And really getting into this world of BDSM gave me so much of that sexual power back, which then also gave me some of my feeling of personal power back, because then I walked through the world and, like, it seems almost crazy to say it, but after you have a guy punch you in the face and you can look him right in the eyes while he's doing it, and you don't cry and you don't power, you really feel powerful afterwards. But also, again, why was I doing that? It was
Right.
partially out of trauma. And that's why, I really think that if anybody is going to explore BDSM, you really have to be sure that the person you're going into it with is well educated, that you really have discussions beforehand about your boundaries. Because even after that situation, like, it still pains me to think about it. When I saw my face, I was like, oh, my husband's going to kill me. Like,
Oh,
because
okay.
I had bruises on my face, like, I had a busted lip. And he, of course, because most people didn't know, especially then, that we were polyamorous, right away, he was like, everybody's going to think that I did that to you. And so and that's a big part of being polyamorous as well, is that it's not just about me and what I want. That was a conversation that we had to have where he was like, I'm concerned that it's great that this feels good for you and you feel empowered by it. But
Yeah.
also, I'm concerned that you may get hurt in the process and not say to stop, not because, you're afraid to say to stop, but because
Yeah.
you're just in the moment, not at a place where you're realizing. And I was like, okay, valid. And so I scaled it back a lot since then, because I realized that, again, it's not just about me. It's not, just about what I want. I'm in this relationship with my husband, and, we do have children together. And so I had to take all of those things into
Right.
consideration. So I scaled back. But again, everybody kind of, I think, goes at, a BDSM relationship differently. Some people, it's just more about like, one of the things that I can't take at all, like, again, you could punch me in the face, but if you call me names, if you call me a brat, if you say things to me, then instantly I'm like, nope, 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 I'm done. I can't do
That's a
this.
turn off for you.
It's such a turnoff. It's such a trigger in not a pleasant way, in a
Right.
way that just makes me feel defensive and like cringy. And so I had to shut any of that down. I was like, you can bend me over table and like spank my butt until it looks like I mean, it was black and blue. Like, it actually looked like the universe to me afterwards. I was like, oh, it kind of looks pretty. But
So was that something though that it's like going into okay, so sorry, have you guys been polyamory, like polyamorous relationship the whole time you guys have been together?
oh, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, basically we have. I didn't know what polyamory was when
Yeah.
we first started dating. What I did know was that um, my father was a cheater. I mean, he cheated on every woman I think that he ever was with. I had boyfriends in the past that cheated on me. And one of them, even in particular, I had said to him, literally said to him, you could do whatever you want, just don't lie to me about it. And then when he cheated on me and I found out, he was like, I thought you were kidding. I'm like, why would I kid about that? So when my husband and I started dating in college, we had already been friends. So he already knew a lot of like my history. And he actually used to kind of like give me a hard time. He'd be like, I don't understand why you're such a man hater. And I was like, I don't hate men. I just hate the things that they get away with. And I would have, even then, I would rather be single than deal with that. And
Right.
so when we started dating, um, really early on, I was kind of like, really, for real, like, you could do whatever you want. Just don't lie to me. Like, just come
Yeah.
home and like tell me. If you go to a bar and you meet somebody and you hook up, come home and tell me about it. Don't lie about it.
Yeah.
And so we kind of had just considered ourselves like an open relationship. And then we tried swinging. We were young. We were in like our early 20s, and we were like going to swinger parties together. And like, I don't know, I kind of always felt like, as the woman, I was always getting like the worst part of the deal, like, where I
Right.
was kind of ending up like, he'd get these like amazing, beautiful like models, and I'd get stuck with like their gross old husband that like is fine when you're married to him and he's worth $1 million
Yeah.
or whatever. But like, I just kind of wasn't into it. So we just kind of stuck with this idea of like, well, we'll just have an open relationship. We could do whatever we want, just don't lie about it. But then, like, we moved home for me, home to New Jersey, small town. We opened a business, so all we did was work, and we just kind of like, still had the same rules, essentially, still had the same ideas. But we're just kind of like doing our thing of like running a business and then having kids. So once the kids got a little bit older, and then at that point, I'd heard the term polyamory. And then we were kind of like, well, maybe we'll try going on a dating site and like try to like meet other couples and see what happens. But then, like, with having two kids, we were like, well, why don't we just date people separately? And so it just kind of like evolved into becoming polyamory from just basically having this understanding of like, I don't care what you do as long as it's not, hurting me, hurting you, hurting our family,
Yeah.
and that you're not lying to me about it. And so um, it works really well for us. And it's not, I don't know. I mean, it's again, it's not as much about sex as people think it is. It's really about developing relationships. Like, I have to say, my husband has great taste in women. And I'm not just saying that because I'm like, he's my husband, he married me, but like legitimately, the women that he dates are women that are strong and they're powerful, and they just like, we have great conversations. And like, his partner right now, we just went away on vacation and she watered all my plants for me. And like, it's really about bringing people into your life that you can have really deep relationships with, that a traditional style of relationship tends to not allow.
But did
Because
that
if
not
they're,
create, sorry, did that not create any
yeah,
feelings of insecurity though? Of, knowing that they're finding, that your partner's finding other women, that he's finding things that maybe, like, I guess in a sense where it's like, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I don't have that quality, but he must really like that. And I'm lacking. And then, like, for it to create some of those, like, and I know people do it successfully. I talked to a
mhm,
woman last week about it, but same thing. Like, I always wonder, like, okay, if he's out there looking for this and this is what he's attracted to, but I know that that's not something I have, I feel like in an intimate way, it would almost trigger those insecurities, which I guess is, the part of healing, our traumas and our stuff, to be able to do that in a healthy way. But did that not ever happen for you?
yeah, it still does happen occasionally. Um, Not often though with me and my husband, but again, we have always had such an open, honest relationship even from the beginning, and we had such a deep friendship even from the beginning, that we are a little bit different, I think, than a lot of couples. And there is still times, where my insecurities get triggered. I find it happens more from other partners that I've had, not as much with my husband. With my husband, I know that he loves me, and again, that's also communication, having constant conversations with each other, connecting with each other. Like, I know that he loves me. I know he's not going to leave me for somebody else, even if the sex is better, or the sex is different, or whatever it is. Um, those relationships are just adding to our life. But some of my external relationships have definitely been very triggering. Things that I thought I had already healed in myself because
Right.
my husband didn't trigger them are now being triggered by other partners, or potentially like my other partners, right? Because like then you
Okay.
start getting into like dynamics of like, it's not just about me and the person that I'm dating, it's also other
Right.
people that they're dating. Because a lot of polyamorous people, we date within the same type of relationship style.
Yeah.
Even though my partner that I have now, that we've been together for, I don't know, going on 4 years, he was traditionally monogamous. We met outside of a dating app or a polyamorous situation. Like, we just met in the real world, which, it was kind of one of those things where, you're having the conversation and it's like, by the way, like, I'm polyamorous. So, like, because it's hard. Like, I have very open, honest conversations with people, and if people don't know I'm polyamorous, then I feel like sometimes it gets very like, well, why is she talking to me about these things? Like, isn't she married? Or like, why is she saying? And so then sometimes I'll find myself having to be like, by the way, I'm polyamorous. So, like, if I'm saying to you, let's meet for coffee because I want to have a conversation with you further about what we're talking about, I might not even be interested in that person romantically, but it still feels so strange to people that they're like, but she's married. Why is she asking me to go have coffee? You know?
Right.
And so I've had these conversations in the past, and I just happened to have a conversation with my partner where I was like, and by the way, like, it's fine. My husband's like,
Yeah.
cool if I have friends. And then it just evolved into something else. But he's traditionally monogamous. And so, he doesn't really have any other partners. Of course, COVID has completely changed the way that I date anyway. Like, we used
Right.
to go to sex clubs. My husband and I would we would have so much fun sometimes at these clubs. I'd get all dressed up and be all like, again, almost like a different version of myself that
Yeah.
doesn't show up every day. And, especially when he has like, a partner that's willing to go with us. Like for Christmas one year, he dressed up as Santa, and like me and his partner dressed up as like Santa's like little slutty elves, and like
Yeah.
it was
Oh,
fun.
cute.
It was so cute. And the pictures were great. Like we had so much fun. But like now I've gotten so away from that because, I for a long time was not going to go into a club where I had to get anywhere near people.
Yeah.
Um I don't even know if that's what I want anymore. And that's the thing too, is like there's this evolving conversation of my husband asking me like, "Well, do you want to go back to the club when like we feel comfortable?" I don't know. I don't know if I
Yeah.
want to. But also, if he wants to go without me, that's okay. I'm not going to say, "Well, I don't want to go anymore, so you can't go." Like if he wants to
Right.
go, awesome, go have a good time. And so like there's definitely a lot of communication that has to happen, and there is the idea of boundaries, which boundaries to me gets very frustrating because I feel like people don't understand what boundaries actually are. And that's one of the things that I actually discovered through polyamory, is that by like dating people where they'd say, "Well, my wife and I have a boundary that we can't have sex in our bed with anybody else, and we can't do this and we can't do that. We can't." And I'm like, "But that's not a boundary. That's a rule." And that to me is different. And that's fine if that's your rules. But like we need to get a little clear on what boundaries actually
So
mean, you
what is
know?
a boundary for you then in comparison to say like like a couple's rules that they try to abide by to, what would be the big difference for you?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So for me, when it comes to a boundary, it means what I am going to do or not do depending on a situation. Like all of you are welcome to do whatever you want. But if I'm presented with a certain situation where, say, if I'm dating a man and his wife is really having a hard time, which has happened to me in the past, and she's really struggling, and so he's saying, "Well, I'm just not going to tell her that we met tonight." Okay, that's fine. That's on you. But I am not participating in that.
Yeah.
Like that's something that I do not feel good about. So that's my boundary. Like I won't be with people that are essentially cheating even in the polyamorous world.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the way that it was. I made some poor decisions in the past. Like I will
Yeah.
admit that I made poor decisions in the past. And that's why now I won't do that anymore, because I learned that it does not feel good to me to
Right.
feel like, again, I got into a relationship style like this because I didn't want to have to lie and cheat and feel bad and feel like I'm trying to keep story. Like I don't want any of that.
Yeah.
So why am I going to put myself in a position to be in a relationship where I still feel like I need to do that, even though technically the couple's polyamorous? But I do
So there's
find,
still a level of respect for it.
oh, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's, and it's hard because I think there is people that get into polyamorous relationships to try to save marriages that aren't working, or
Right.
somebody already had an affair. So now they're going to be polyamorous. And like, so again, you come across a lot of different things in the world of polyamory, but that doesn't mean that everybody's doing it for that reason. And
Right.
it also doesn't mean that even if that's the reason somebody got into it originally, that it means that they're not going to be successful at it in the long run. I mean, it's like anything else in life. Like everybody's different. Some things we try to do, we don't do them well, especially at
Yes.
the
Yeah.
beginning. We get better at it as we go. But I really like, I've still have friends that were partners at one point that are now friends of mine
Hmm.
that have now gone on to be in monogamous relationships. but we're still able to stay friends. But it was one of those things too where it's like, yes, but now you have to tell your partner that this is what we used to do in the past, so that
Yes.
there's never a point where like it's going to be like, oh, well, why didn't you tell me that you and
Yeah.
Jill used to do this?
Right.
And it's like I really just have found, we were dating for a while. My husband and I were on like dating apps, and man, I found so many interesting people that I just connected with that I never even dated, but we just became friends. And, it's really one of those experiences that it has been difficult. When my mother really found out, she did not
I was
handle
going
it.
to ask, how does your family and like your friends that aren't involved in this, how did they handle this? How did they, what were their thoughts? What were their concerns towards you guys as a couple and raising children in this type
Yeah.
of lifestyle, right? Because how old are your kids?
So my son is 11 and my daughter is 8. So they are
And
still pretty young.
yeah, are they kind of aware? Do they see you guys with other partners? Is there, like
Mhm.
that open dating type of situation out in public and they're around? Do they have an understanding of it, or is it kind of something you guys don't really talk about with them right now?
No, our kids, because we've basically been like this,
Mm-hmm.
for our entire relationship. Once we did start actively dating, and we've always had a lot of friends around. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like our kids could tell, like, is this just a regular friend or is this
Right.
somebody, you know what I mean? So like they were never really able to tell the difference. But they have met a lot of our partners and they still see a lot of our partners. And the partners that we have right now, um, my kids love my partner, love him. My daughter makes little art stuff to like send to him, and
Oh, that's
my
cute.
husband, it's adorable. And my husband's partner, she has a daughter that is around the same age. So they're like best friends now. And like, yes,
Okay.
when relationships end, when my husband's relationship ended with his last partner, the kids did have some questions and they really loved her. And
Mm-hmm.
so, part of me was like, okay, so like, how do we really work through this? But it was fine. Like in the end, they just wanted to know, like, well, did you break up with her? Did she break up with you? Well, why? Is it because, things like I forget how my daughter worded it, but it was like because you're just not getting along anymore or something. And
Right.
so we just had some conversations and it was fine because
Yeah.
that's the biggest concern that even people that I've met that are polyamorous are like, "Oh, but my kids don't know. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
never, like, our partners never mix, like, my wife never meets, like, my partners, like, I never meet her." Like, again, very different dynamic. And if that's how
Yeah.
people want to do it, that's fine. Like, I'm not judging them for it. But we just found that that wasn't going to work for us because it really was more about building connections and just bringing more people into
Right.
our life that we love and that love us. And so, whenever we have Thanksgiving, our Thanksgivings are the best. We used to have a huge Thanksgiving party pre COVID, and like anybody and everybody was invited, and
Yeah.
all different partners, past, present, like just
Okay. Yeah.
friends, everybody was invited.
I mean, I guess essentially the foundation of what your kids are seeing is still a happy home, a home full of love, support, encouragement, openness, honesty. And those are really,
Mhm.
I feel like, the foundations of things that we try to instill in our children, right? Like letting
Yeah.
them know that what a healthy relationship looks like, letting them know the open conversations, being able to talk about anything. And kind of giving them those tools more so than feeling like you have to hide things from them. Because I really do think it makes the difference of anything, right? It's that open communication part. And it sounds like you guys obviously have navigated that quite well in your guys' marriage and with your children. So it's funny because I know probably social stigma surrounding those things, especially in a marriage where there is children, they'd be like, oh my god, I can't believe you guys tell them this. Oh my god, I can't believe you talk to them. But I mean, at the end of the day, it really is about, their home life is still, the foundation of everything that they get that they need. And this is just a different dynamic that they get to be part of. And so much more love coming in different ways, right? Especially if they do get to meet those people that are special in your guys' lives, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not like we discuss like our sex life with the kids,
Right.
but I mean,
Yeah.
who does that anyway? Like, you
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing that really anyway, except in an age appropriate manner,
Totally.
but like, it's it's really it's hard because I do try to teach my children to be confident in who they are,
Mm-hmm.
but there is times when like I'm sure their friends might say something and they'll say, "Well, that's my mom's boyfriend." And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Well, your mom's married." And so, I tried to kind of like gently say like, "Well, maybe that's just not a conversation you need to have."
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, so far it hasn't been a problem, like nobody's really said anything to them that they've ever said to us, and every once in a while I check in about it.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't hide the fact that I'm polyamorous, but I also don't just go out and tell everybody either.
Right.
Like I'm kind of walking this fine line of like when people need to know, then I will tell them.
Yeah.
But it definitely is met sometimes with hesitation, especially like in a small town. And not everybody is okay with it. In the long run, I don't care. It's not their life.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if they're okay with it or not. But I also don't want to be in a small town. But again, I mean, I don't know. There was even somebody that my husband met, and he was like, "By the way, the mayor, when I told him that like we were friends, was like, do you know they're swingers? So like it's
Yeah.
around, like everybody in the town basically knows." And I was like, "By the way, I'm not a swinger. Just to clear this up a little bit,
Yeah.
like, but like." So again, it's not a hidden thing, but I really just I know that it is unusual, and I think it makes people uncomfortable until we have a conversation, and sometimes I just don't want to talk about it. So I just
Totally.
don't say anything. And then
Yeah.
I feel a little bad where I'm almost like, yeah, but like my partner's a huge part of my life. I almost feel like I'm hiding him from people, but also
Right.
for the most part, he doesn't care. He's just kind of like a kind of private person anyway. So he was like, I don't really care. Where like my husband and his girlfriend, they go to stuff all the time together. And,
Mm-hmm.
actually, my partner came down to a Halloween parade with me with the kids this year. So like it was like the two of us and the two kids. And like, again, you know what? Like if somebody says anything, I will happily explain to them. But for the
Yeah.
most part, nobody says anything. And so it's fine. But
I think that's just the big thing too, is the fact that like we get so wrapped up and so caught up into worrying about what other people are going to think about us, or what society thinks we should be doing with our sex lives, with our sexuality, with our lives, with our marriages, and with everything, that you're trying to fit into this box of what, the belief systems that we were raised with, when in all reality they really don't work for everybody. And
Mhm.
acknowledging that, and then finding something that does work for you guys, and I mean for anybody, I feel like is really the like what it should be about, and normalizing these type of relationships. And it is more common now. There's so many more people that are kind of coming out with it and talking about it, and people who are probably always doing it but you never knew, but now because of social media and things like this, people are sharing their lifestyles. And I think the more you get to know people and you talk to the people who are actually doing it, it's like you realize at the end of the day they're no different than, me or you or the person next door. And they've just found something that, works for them, that's a little bit maybe less traditional than what somebody else was raised with, but it's still a functioning, lifestyle, and it's still a functioning relationship that obviously, I do feel that open relationships or polyamorous relationships, there is a different level of communication and vulnerability and authenticity that goes into that than what most people have in their own, monogamous relationships. And that's the part that I think I really like, is it forces you to learn how to communicate. It forces you to actually talk about your boundaries. It forces you to be so vulnerable and open with your partner in order to maintain it and be able to do it where you both feel still respected and loved. And a lot of, regular relationships are lacking that. That's why I think so many people end up cheating and straying, is there's something lacking in their relationship, and then they outsource it, but they outsource it in an unhealthy way with cheating and things like that, instead of having these tough conversations. So I really do respect the community, and I really do respect people who have these type of relationships, because think it shows others a level of, connection that, we all wish we had in our relationships that a lot of people are missing. I do have to ask then, so through your polyamorous relationships, you obviously came across partners who were into BDSM, which is how you originally got introduced to it, correct?
I actually searched out partners that were into BDSM, because
Okay.
that's one of the things, you create your profile on,
Right.
whatever dating app. And
Yeah.
I specifically searched for partners that were into BDSM, just things that were a little bit fringier. Like, actually, one of my best friends now, and one of my favorite partners I've ever had, he
Mm-hmm.
was into basically like Kundalini energy Reiki kind of
Yes.
stuff. And I
Okay.
was like, yep, I want to try that.
Yep.
And that actually, to me, was harder than the BDSM was, because I felt so vulnerable. And he
Mm-hmm.
explained to me, he's like, you're going to be on a table, like I'm going to have my hands on you, above you, like, but like you're probably going to feel some shaking, you might feel like you have to cry. I sobbed, like I cried harder. And then, of course, afterwards, I was so embarrassed. And he was like, no, it's fine. The aftercare is super
Yep.
important, no matter what you're into, right? I had never experienced anything like that in my life. It really, literally felt like it shifted things in my body that I was able to let go of. And then we just practiced on each other for many years. We
Mm-hmm.
practiced together on like other women. It it is one of the most fulfilling relationships I've ever had in my life,
Okay.
even though we don't practice like that together anymore. But it healed me so much in a way that I didn't know I needed to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I specifically sought out all these different relationships, and I was seeing him at the same time that I was seeing another person that was very much on that other end of the spectrum of the BDSM. That, it just was all these different facets of me. And that's where, for me, I found that it actually makes me a better wife and it makes me a better mother by being able to go out and explore things that I find interesting. So I don't get stuck in the role of that, I'm mom or I'm this person's
Right.
wife or whatever else. Like, it really allowed me to go out and feel like I was me again,
Mm-hmm.
and to explore things that I was interested in. That some things I tried, I did not
Yep.
like. Other things, like I really got into pegging for a while, if you know what pegging is.
I
Uh,
do. We just talked about that actually.
oh my God. So, like,
Yeah.
I didn't think that was something I'd ever be interested in. And then I decided I wanted to try it. And so, actually, one of my husband's partners was like, oh, that's something I love to do. You want me to teach you how? So, we did a skill share. She brought over one of her other partners, me, her, and this partner
Yeah.
all got together, and she taught me how to peg. And I was like, this is amazing. And so then I specifically started searching out partners that were into pegging. That's
Did
not
you not
every partner.
find that it like, because we talked about it, and I said, I was like, I want to do it just for like, I guess, shits and giggles, but I was like, I don't know that I could take a guy seriously after he let me do that, because, and I mean, maybe just because I haven't done it, but in my mind, it's like I feel like I would be taking away, I would become the more masculine one, and I don't know that then I could switch that in my mind, because funny enough, like, I mean, sexually, I've always kind of been the one in control, but I find with like that, the BDSM and like some of the Dom sub stuff, I find in the last year, I've been really drawn to um, men, I guess, or conversations with guys online, like through social media that, I mean, they don't even live here, but they'll have conversations that they take that Dom role and then all of a sudden they'll say things and I'm like, oh, I think I would like this, because I feel like the same thing is like, I've lacked trust so much in all of my relationships that even sexually, I've never been able to give up that control. I needed it, but I feel like I'm at a point where it's like, I want to give it to somebody because I want to have that depth of trust that, like you said, it's like, you know that they'll stop, but you also know that they're pushing you I guess, out of your comfort zone in a way that's healthy, but it lets you address your triggers and your wounds and your traumas. And it's like, I feel like I'm at a point where it's like, I just desperately want that. But then I think of like that situation and I'm like, if I'm looking for somebody who's going to be the dom and a more masculine person so that I can be the more feminine and submissive, then me doing that to a guy, I feel like I would be taking that away from him and I don't know that I could look at them the same. So how did you do that and have it not kind of mess with your mind in that way?
Yeah, no, that's actually something that I wasn't sure about either.
Mhm.
Um, but the key for me was always that I was only doing it to them when they wanted it. It's not like I was like, hey, I'm going to put this thing on and you're going to bend over and I'm going to do it. Like,
Yeah.
it was still more like just a normal interaction. But then I would switch into this role, but I was still doing what they told me to do. I was essentially still submitting because
Okay.
I am very dominant in my personal life.
Mhm.
Um, so I find that for me to really really relax into a sexual relationship, I have to be more submissive. Like no matter what that means, whether it's like
Mhm.
I like missionary because I like being on the bottom and feeling very like covered, right?
Mhm.
Or just being told what to do. Like I'm not the person that's going to be like, I want to do this next. Like I rarely talk because like it's just not the way that I do things. So for me, it actually didn't change the way that I viewed partners. And if anything, I found it really interesting because a lot of the men that I would do this with from the outside, they were the very like not what you were expecting somebody to be into in the bedroom. The way
Right.
that they presented themselves outwardly. Some of them were like the super pretty boys, like really good looking, like, football player looking dudes. And then it would come down and they'd be like, all right, can you please do this thing to me? And I'm like, yes, I can. Thank you for asking. So it actually really didn't because I was afraid of that I tend to not be attracted to more like I tend to not be sexually attracted to men that are more feminine in a lot of ways, not
Right.
necessarily look feminine, but the way that we interact.
Yeah.
Emotionally, I will be more attracted to that, but like physically, sexually, that's not usually what I'm attracted to. So I was a little concerned about that, but I found that as long as they were still in control, and that I could see how much they were enjoying it. And I liked the way that my body moves when I'm doing it. Like, so again,
Okay.
whether I'm using it with a woman or using it with a man, it's still that same movement.
Right.
And like, yeah. And so I actually really loved it. But, any of my longer term partners, that's not been their thing. They've not been into that. Like, I haven't actually dated what I would consider dated anybody that's into it. That tended to more just be like a play situation, not as much of like a dating
Right.
situation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that I love the most about all of these different lifestyles or these different avenues of like sexuality, like tantric sex, like you said, the Kundalini, BDSM, for example. I think what I like the most about it is that it really forces people to slow down when it comes to sex. I know you grow up being taught and talking about foreplay and things like that, but I mean, sex in itself, I feel like with most people is a pretty rushed thing. It's, you got this amount of time at the end of the day, you got this or whatever. And I don't think a lot of people really take the time to know their bodies, to know what they really like, to slow down together in a partner situation. And I mean, speaking from experience, I mean, I've dated for, well over 20 years and most sexual encounters really last anywhere from, 5 minutes to let's say 15 minutes. Well, what is it that you're accomplishing in 15 minutes with somebody? Most of the time, the guy's kind of getting off pretty quickly. And I think a girl usually gets to the point where they're a little frustrated and then, we fake it and we call it a day, right? But to do the tantric stuff, to do that Kundalini stuff, and to do BDSM, you are actually forced to slow down. You are taking your time. These experiences can last anywhere from, I would say, 30 minutes upwards of an hour to 2 hours. And you
Oh
really get
yeah.
to enjoy the person you're with. You get to enjoy yourself. You get to have orgasms on a different level. And that's what I find fascinating, because it's like, I think it's like this fast paced lifestyle we get into, and then all of a sudden sex is that same thing. And it just seems like people are really missing out. And maybe that's why people think they need it more often. I mean, a person could probably have sex once a day. Well, if your sexual encounters are only lasting 5 minutes to 15 minutes, well, of course you could do it once a day. But if you're having a proper session with somebody and really taking the time to explore each other, and that session is, an hour to 2 hours together, you're probably not going to do that every day, but your experiences are so much more unique and deep when you do it, that
Hmm.
you wouldn't need to do it 5 days a week. You could have one or two experiences a week and really feel so fulfilled in so many other ways, that I think that that's what's beautiful about it.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is. It's definitely, even now, what I would call like regular sex for me
Mm-hmm.
has changed the more that I explored these other avenues that allowed me to discover more about myself, about my body, what I
Yeah.
like, what I don't like, because that's the thing too. My husband and I have been together for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually you just do things the same way, especially once there's kids and there's all this other stuff. And like,
Yeah.
you just kind of go through the motions sometimes.
Yeah.
And, you know, getting involved with other partners that are interested in other things then allows us to explore things that maybe we wouldn't have done together, but then we're like, oh, but this was kind of fun, you want to try it, because
Yeah.
like that was a good time.
Yeah.
And you're right, like I think especially for a lot of women, 5 to 15 minutes is what it takes for us to warm up. That's how long
Mm-hmm.
it takes me to relax sometimes during
Mm-hmm.
sex. Like, I have to, especially because of past sexual traumas, that, like, for so long, and I was like re traumatizing myself every time I had sex because I would be so tense and I would be so anxious and then
Mm-hmm.
it would hurt. And, like, but I would still do it because I had to do it. I felt like I had to do it, whatever else happened. So, for many years, even with my husband, it's not that he was doing it to me. I was traumatizing myself by being like,
Right.
well, we have to have sex because we are in this relationship. So, like, we need to go through the motions. And then it was hurting me. And I just kept
Yeah.
doing it anyway because I thought I had to. So now I found that it takes me a long time to be able to relax to a point where my body can be like, this is safe. You're
Yeah.
okay. It's not going to hurt. If it's 5 to 15 minutes, like, I'm basically at that point just like, all right, let's just get it over with because I'm kind
Mm-hmm.
of just sitting here anyway, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Where, like, now, even just a regular, like, sex kind of experience that's not necessarily BDSM or Tantra. But even though, like, I found that once I awaken, like, when they talk about, like, once you awaken the Kundalini energy,
Mm-hmm.
like, it legit now, when I have sex, there's times when my entire body is shaking just from like this energy flowing through me. My hands shake, like,
Yeah.
my entire body will shake for a really long, extended period of time. That's
Yeah.
not something that could happen in a brief session. And you're right,
Right.
I couldn't have sex like that every night, even if I wanted to. Like, that
Yeah.
would be exhausting. Once a week
Yes.
is plenty for me, maybe
Yeah.
twice, but like, I can't, I can't turn my mind off long enough as well sometimes because there's so
Mm-hmm.
much going on, and like for me, that was always a lot of it too, is I do have a harder time having sex in my house.
Yeah.
Partially the distractions, I'm like looking around my room now at all the stuff that I should be doing, that, like, God forbid, if I'm trying to have sex and I'm like, oh, but there's a huge pile of laundry and I should be doing this. And then I
Mm-hmm.
hear like the kids and then I'm like, oh my God, like, I can't do this. I
Yeah.
can't relax enough. So
Yeah.
for me, having a partner that, lives in a different space than I do, being able to remove myself and go there is partially what allows me as well to, like, relax into it. And
Totally.
it's okay. Like, that's something I've learned about myself, and it is okay. I used to feel really bad about it. I used to shame myself about it, but now
Yeah.
I'm like,
Well, and
it's
I
okay.
think we do, because I think naturally as women we want to please, right? So
Hmm.
it's like naturally we have this instinct to ensure that the man is being pleased and to do what he wants. And like I guess sometimes when it's like we have that pressure that we think that this is about them, it doesn't allow us to have those longer sessions, to ease into our bodies, to relax, because it's like, oh, he's initiating this, he's doing this, oh, okay, he wants to go straight to this. And then now you just think that it's about them getting off, right?
Mhm.
And we have a hard time separating that and actually saying, whoa, hold on a minute, like, no, no, I need you to do this for me, I need this, right? And it is slowing that down. And I think that, yeah, I think that that's just one of the things that I think women on a whole probably need to kind of claim that back for ourselves, even in monogamous relationships, is, really stepping into our sexuality, stepping into the things that we know that work for us, learning about the things that work for us, because there's so many tools and there's so much information out there on different types of sex and sexuality and different things. And it doesn't have to be necessarily in a, open relationship, but it's like even in for yourself, learning, masturbation for yourself without porn and tools and things like that. And really doing those things and being able to then share that with your partner of like, this is what I've learned about myself that I really like, that really works. Let's do this together. And I do think men like to please women. I just think that sometimes we get stuck believing and thinking that, they think that this is what's pleasing us. So we're just going to pretend and go along with it because it'll make them happy. And instead of telling them and teaching them, because we're all so different, like all so different of what works for us, right? And, learning that, but that is claiming our sexuality. And I feel like we've been shamed for it for so long in so many ways that we believe we're not meant to be sexual, we're not allowed to be sexual, we can't project our sexuality, and then we carry that forward into the bedroom, and it is a trauma, and it is something that, it's that programming. But to be able to step outside of it and learn so many different ways in which we can achieve a healthy sexual relationship and orgasms that are fulfilling, right?
Yeah, and I think it's hard as well because, in my experience, one of the things too, like I'm in my 40s and I have dated guys that are like in their early 20s now because
Mm-hmm.
I can, so why not? All the way up to guys that are in their 60s, over the last few years. And so um, I have discovered that a lot of men, I think because the way that society sets things up, a lot of men don't like it if you tell them how to do something because they take it as in a lack in them. They
Mm-hmm.
think that they should just know. They should be able to tell. And so if you're like, "Hey, maybe this isn't working out really well." And this is again around all ages.
Mm-hmm.
There's this little bit of like they get like their feelings hurt, which then has always in the past made me more hesitant to speak up because then I
Mm-hmm.
was afraid of like killing the mood and that things wouldn't be able to get back on track. And, for me, with my husband having other partners, that was great because then he was able to take feedback from other women and learn different ways of doing things. And then also realize that there was nothing wrong with the way that he did things. There's just different
Mm-hmm.
ways to do things.
Right.
And so he's learned to take more feedback. But I've definitely, experienced partners where, and like sometimes now, like, I've been in situations where guys are definitely kind of like, whoa, like you're really bossy. And I'm like, actually, I'm really not bossy
Mm-hmm.
at all. But I'm just kind of like trying to guide us a little different direction. But again, those are the guys that then I'm like, yeah, this obviously is not going to work. It was nice meeting
Right.
you, hanging out once, but like, we're not going to do this again. Um, and that allowed me to learn about myself as well because I realized how hard it was for me to speak up about what worked for me and what didn't work for me. And this like idea of women faking it all the time. I still talk to women that, even polyamorous women, that are kind of like, yeah, sometimes I fake it just because I want to get this over with. And I'm like, yeah, I understand, but
Yeah.
like, now, like, I think too a lot of women, it's like, I can't orgasm just from sex. I never
Mm-hmm.
have been able to, probably never will be able to, and that's okay as well. Um, but in the past, like I would have felt really awkward, like, when I was younger, especially like finishing myself, because then
Right.
also I even had a guy when I was younger. say to me he thought I was trying to get myself pregnant because he thought I was trying to push cum inside me. And I was like, are you out of your mind?
Oh,
So, like,
wow.
right. So, like, these were some of the things that, like, as women we come across, which then makes us more like, you know what, you're right. I'm just going to lay here and get this over with just to
Yeah,
let you do your thing so I could just move on and go fold that laundry that's driving me crazy. And it's
totally.
unfortunate because it really doesn't have to be that way. But we don't talk about sex in a healthy manner. We don't teach our children about sex in a healthy manner.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all go out into this world of like not having great sexual experiences and then essentially passing that on to all of our other partners
Yeah,
afterwards, And I had said that to my husband even when we first started dating. I said, I am really sorry that like you have to pay for what other men did to me before.
yeah,
And it was the truth. I was sorry about it, but I also, there was really at that point, there was nothing I was finding could really help me heal this sexual trauma to be able to just be able to really enjoy sex because for
yeah,
many years I didn't, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It just I was not able to do it. And
yeah. You know
yeah,
what I
so
think of?
like
I'm always
yeah,
like, I think of how many years I spent having unfulfilling sex and not knowing these things and not being taught these things. And like you said, having healthy conversations with our children about these things, because I think if somebody would have talked to me about these things in a healthy way when I was at a young age and there was so much more open conversation about it, I feel like I probably would have had healthier relationships, healthier sexual relationships. I would have known my boundaries
yeah,
better. I would have had that more respect for, I guess, myself and my body in a sexual way where I didn't feel like I owed somebody something um, in so many different sexual encounters. And like you said, right, like if we teach this stuff and give the tools and the information to men and women at a young age, I feel like it would really, really make a huge difference in preventing unfulfilling sexual experiences, or this idea that we have to stay with somebody for other reasons when that aspect of a relationship isn't working. But we don't, because like you said, sex
mhm,
is so frowned upon to talk about.
yeah,
And it can be so damaging, right? And we should be able to talk about it. We should be able to teach our children these things at a young age. And I'm not talking young, but like age appropriate, what
yeah,
these conversations look like, how to have them, how to understand yourself, how to respect yourself in that way, and how to be able to speak up for yourself if something isn't working, and not thinking that it's hurting our partner. It blows my mind because I just think, wow, I have stayed in long-term relationships being so unsatisfied, and same thing, painful sex and things like that, but just thinking that it's like I just had to, right? Because that was the norm and you can't say anything. And I just think of how damaging it is to men and women to not be able to talk about these things in a way that is then beneficial for them mentally and physically as well. And honestly, I really do think that the more people talk about it, the more we normalize these conversations, that it will hopefully eventually help other people, and help people maybe who are listening, and young women or young men that are listening, to realize that these are conversations you should be able to have. And if you don't know how to have these conversations, I do believe in outsourcing, help, and outsourcing somebody who can help navigate these conversations for people in their relationship, searching tools, searching out education on these things, and really, understanding that you can have these conversations, these relationships, and healthy sexual relationships with people. That's, I guess, my biggest thing that I think of too, is just like you said, you learn so much about yourself when you actually become that vulnerable to
yeah.
look at what you're doing, and have partners who are willing to look at what you're doing and want to get to know you and want to respect your boundaries and want to learn things together, right?
Yeah, and I've learned so much about myself
Mm-hmm.
being able to explore myself sexually, but not just sexually, but
Mm-hmm.
also just meeting other people and having relationships with other people and being triggered in ways that I thought I had healed. And it gives me the
Yeah.
opportunity now to do even a deeper dive into my healing work. And the thing too with children is, one of the biggest conversations that people don't have with their children is around consent.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it all the time with adult and kid and kid interactions, where I say to both my son and my daughter, if somebody says no, you need to stop what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you say no to somebody, they need to stop what they're doing. Like, that's an expectation that you need to be able to have on both ends. That right
Totally.
there is the beginning of having a conversation around healthy sexual boundaries. And also, it teaches men that if a woman says to you, like, no, I'm really not in the mood right now, that's okay. You don't get
Yeah.
angry, you don't force her, you don't try to coerce her. Like, how many times do men try to coerce you into doing what? So then eventually women just are like, fine, whatever, let's just do it and
Yeah.
get it over with. Like, I'm
Yeah.
tired of hearing about it.
Yeah.
So, like, that in itself, it's not a discussion that I'm having with my children about sex. It's in the moment that my son's poking my daughter and she keeps saying stop and he's not stopping.
Yeah.
But it still teaches the children to understand that, there is such a thing as having boundaries around what happens to your body, and that if you
Yeah.
communicate them with somebody, they should respect you, and if they don't respect you, then don't be around those people.
Totally.
Or if somebody communicates that to you, it's not personal, don't get upset about it, it just
Yeah.
means that what you're doing right then, they don't like it, so you just go,
Totally.
okay, sorry about that, thanks for letting me know, and you move on. There's
No.
no reason to get upset about it. But we don't have those conversations, like, think about all the,
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you don't want grandma to hug you, come on, let grandma hug you. That right there is starting
Totally.
that behavior of teaching children not to feel comfortable saying, no, I really don't want this right now.
Yeah.
Well, if you love somebody, you would do it.
Yeah.
No, not
Yeah.
really. That's not the way that it works. And so, yeah, you can have healthy conversations with your children that sets them up for having healthy sexual relationships in the future that really have nothing to do with sex when they're young. It's just teaching them to speak
Mm-hmm.
their mind and to listen when other people say something and not take it personal.
No, it's so true. Yeah, no, you're right. I remember somebody told me that too, like about my kids too. It says like, well, don't make them feel guilty, like they have to do something, but it is
Mhm.
important, and that is, you're right. We teach that at a young age, and we should be able to teach that and have them understand what that means as well. I do want to cut it here, Jill. I want
Yeah, sorry.
uh, I know, no, I would love to. I feel like we could just go in so many ways and keep. I love this conversation, but just for the listeners out there, I do want to cut it here. But I would love to have you back again another time and to, go deeper into some of these things and really talk about it, because these are conversations that I just, really enjoy having. But I'm so grateful that you were able to come on here today and to share with me and to share with everybody listening, the dynamics of polyamory and the BDSM, and how, like, the different, avenues of you learning from that and how that helped you heal from your sexual trauma. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us, or anything you would like to say to anybody listening, kind of just before we part here?
I don't think so. I mean, I think one of the things that we could have even talked about is the connection of sex and death, which is my specialty. That
Okay.
maybe I'll have you on my podcast once I get that started at the end of the
Okay.
year, and then we'll talk about sex and death connected. But if
Yes.
anybody, has any questions or anything, like, I am definitely happy to talk to people. So, yeah, I'm sure you'll have my contact info, and they are welcome to reach out to me. Because I
Yes.
do. I love having these discussions. And you're right. I think it's good for all of us the more that we can discuss it and realize that we're normal. This isn't weird. What you're thinking and feeling is not weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's just society that tells you that.
Totally. Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. I will share your information in the notes and stuff, and when I share the content. So if anybody does want to reach out to you to be able to get in touch with you and further some of these conversations and talk to you about your experiences, they'll be able to do that as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. But yeah, thank you so much. And for everybody
Thank you.
listening, thank you guys. And we will see you next week.